back, cancelled operations, increased A&E waiting times, and 70% of trusts thinking that the system is at tipping point.
Talking to the Health Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, in just a moment. But first, in a special report, Daybreak has seen firsthand the pressure facing the ambulance service.
Well, the number of emergency calls in England, because that's the figures we've got, have risen by 14% over 5 years to 8.5 million. In one area looked after by the East of England Ambulance Service, calls were up by a massive 20% since 2007. Well, the Trust claims 70% of calls received are non-emergencies or wasted calls.
Well, Dr Hillary is at an ambulance station in Cambridgeshire. Hillary, it's frontline staff under immense pressure, isn't it?
They're under enormous pressure, Ali. We spent, in a special report for Daybreak, we spent a Friday night shift with the Cambridge ambulance crews, and what we saw just confirmed how much their excellent work is diluted and diverted by inappropriate calls, things that really don't need a blue light response. When we got the call for a big road traffic accident, a horrific collision between some vehicles, it just goes to show how much these people give a fighting chance of life to people involved in something like that. These crews do enormous, fantastic work, but their work is diluted by the nonsense calls as well. They do need further protection. Take a look at this. This is what we saw, and this is not for the squeamish.
A crew from Cambridgeshire preparing for their Friday night shift. I'm with them to witness what they have to deal with.
We're off to a call out for a man who's been assaulted. It's a head injury.
Just your nose hurts, but your hip's hurting as well. He can't walk.
Were you knocked out?
No, he wasn't.
No, he didn't lose consciousness. There was a fight, he was punched in the face. He's got a broken nose.
The gentleman was taken to hospital as a precaution.
70% plus of our calls are non-emergencies. You know, they don't need a blue light response, they don't need a paramedic. The majority don't need to go to hospital. A young girl rang 999 for her boyfriend who was drunk, wanting him carried to bed, cotton bud stuck in someone's ear, and someone who had a toothache for several weeks.
Has suffered a back injury.
And here's another fact. When the controversial NHS 111 service was introduced over the Easter bank holiday weekend, this trust had 4,400 more calls compared to the same time last year. It's hard to dispute a connection.
Well, this was the third call of the night, a non-serious injury to a back, which didn't really need an ambulance, but nevertheless an ambulance attended, and that meant that one of the two ambulances working tonight in Cambridgeshire was tied up for 45 minutes.
The person was in a bit of a sorry state from the caller that the patient couldn't even be seen inside it, but they could hear someone.
In all my years as a GP, I've seen quite a few horrendous things, but nothing prepared me for the next call-out. A road traffic collision involving 3 men in 2 vehicles. I arrived 20 minutes after the call with paramedics fighting to keep all 3 alive. The scene was utter carnage.
Well, this is one of 2 vehicles that were involved in a very serious collision tonight. The other vehicle is just over here. At least 3 occupants were ejected from these vehicles and all have life-threatening injuries. It just goes to show the fantastic job these crews are giving them a fighting chance is diluted by some of the more mundane, trivial calls that don't need ambulances at all.
Hillary, thank you very much. And Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt has been watching that with us. And we see there, you know, it's the real front line. A&E, we're told, is in crisis. It's on your watch. Staff are overwhelmed, and I think everybody's just hoping that you've got some sort of cunning plan.
Well, good morning, Lorraine. And I just think that report shows how lucky we are to have the most brilliant ambulance crews who work under incredible pressure. But I completely agree with Dr. Hillary. I mean, it is scandalous, the number of people who are using emergency services when actually, if they had a better alternative, they wouldn't. And one of the ways that we're going to crack this problem, because A&E departments are under pressure, ambulance services are under pressure, is making sure we have better alternatives than dialing 999. And at the moment, it's just too difficult to see a GP if you need to see a GP. And if you've got young children in the middle of the night, you're not sure if it's urgent, you're not quite sure how much of an emergency it is, but obviously as a mum or a dad you worry about it. We need to have something that makes it easy for you to have an alternative to going into your local
You
A&E.
haven't done that, though, have you? Because, you know, let's talk about the 111 service. That clearly isn't working. It's a complete disaster. People waiting online for hours, doctors not ringing back, people not getting the care that they need.
Well, this is
That's also putting immense pressure on A&Es.
Yeah, well, good morning, Alan. I mean, actually, this is exactly what I am sorting out, because I have said that we need to look at the GP contract, because some very big changes were made in 2004, which removed responsibility for out-of-hours care from GPs, gave them to the old PCTs. And that really is the heart of where the problem started, because it removed that 24/7 responsibility for people on their lists, and it made people feel distant from their GPs. And that is exactly what I have suggested we need to look at. I think it's a really, really important thing if we're going to relieve this
You'll
pressure.
bring it back then?
Well, I said that we need to look at the GP contract, yes,
Right.
and it started
Well, what
a very
do you mean
big
by
debate.
look at it?
Well, because I think it's wrong at the moment that we have broken that personal link between GPs and the people on their lists. I have to say that a number of GPs have maintained that and do a fantastic job. And this is not a criticism of GPs. I mean, they work very, very hard as well, but we've given them a contract which is about box ticking and about process, and not about taking responsibility for people, and that was a really historic mistake.
What about this on the front of the Times? Now, we need radical action, clearly. They're saying that a group of health workers who really are at the coalface, they're saying that 20 hospitals must close to save the NHS. Now, that's people that know what they're talking about. Are you going to listen to them?
Well, I don't agree that it's about closing hospitals, but I do agree that there are ways that we need to change how we deliver services. I'm going to give you an example of that. In London, they halved the death rate from strokes when they reduced the number of hospitals dealing with strokes from 32 to 8. So London is actually the best place in the country now to have a stroke if you're unlucky enough to have one. And so there are times when there's clear clinical evidence that you can do things better if you concentrate on fewer hospitals. But we also have huge pressures on our hospitals. We have an ageing population. We're doing 400,000 more operations every year than at the time of the last general election. So there's huge demand for our hospitals as well.
Lots of people watching this might think that you've got your head buried in the sand. You know, all is not rosy in the NHS. People are describing A&E on this very programme as war zones. What do you say to those people going to work this morning, those doctors and nurses that are trying their hardest to care for people, and you're not making it possible for them because they're working under stress, they're underpaid, undervalued?
They are working magnificently hard, and my job is to make sure I do everything I can to help relieve those pressures. And that's why I've been the Health Secretary who has raised very difficult issues like the GP contract, like the appalling failures in NHS IT systems, which mean that when you go into an A&E department, the A&E doctors can't see your GP record. Now, last year, 11 people died in the NHS because they were given the wrong medicines. If you could actually see someone's GP record, their medication history, you can help avoid those kinds of problems. So I want to be the person who is tackling those problems head on. And I want to say to all of those people, we know how hard you're working. And, you know, we want to do everything possible to support you in that work, because that's what we need.
Okay, thank you very much
Thanks for joining us.
coming in.
Thank you. Good to see you.